Hey everyone, welcome to episode 28 of the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. I am exercise physiologist Joe Cannon, back for another week where we talk about health and fitness, nutrition, wellness, myth busting, and all things to help you save money and keep living to your best. I want to thank everybody, first off, for the great feedback I received on my interview last week with Jessica Lewis, where we talked about healthy smoothie recipes. That was actually a lot of fun for me as well. And actually, because of that interview, I have to say that I've even started adding kiwis to the smoothies that I make. They really do add a unique flavor to it. So if you've never added a kiwi to your smoothies, give it a try. They're not bad. I don't taste any roughness of the skin. It tastes really good, I have to admit. So kudos for Jessica for giving me that tidbit. Oh, and if you missed that episode, that conversation, just jump back to episode number 27 and you can hear the entire interview uncut. And I think you'll get a lot of information out of it. Interviews with experts and authorities in their field is actually something I've been wanting to do a long time with this podcast, because quite frankly, nobody can know everything, not even me, unfortunately. And I'll be honest with you, though, I think it really helps to get the facts directly from those who are closest to what you want to know about. And that brings me to this week. This week, we take another deep dive into exercise-induced rhabdomyolysis, but I'm going to do it a little differently this time. This week, I'm going to let someone else do the talking as I interview Alexandra Feszko. Alexandra is a woman who has had rhabdomyolysis multiple times. Yes, you've heard me right, multiple times. Her experiences with this disorder really adds to the conversation, and I believe helps raise awareness of a condition that, quite frankly, I believe doesn't get the attention it deserves. And so you're going to hear a lot about exercise rhabdo this week from Alexandra. I really do think you're going to get a lot out of this interview. But before we get to Alexandra and all she has to tell us, let's jump to the myth of the week. And the myth of the week this time is, again, born out of a question I was asked recently about a dietary supplement that's touted to raise testosterone levels. It's been around for many years. It's called Tribulus terrestis. Tribulus terrestis. Most people in the gym probably just call it Tribulus. It's been around for, gee whiz, at least 20 years that I'm aware of. And it is found in a lot of testosterone boosting supplements. So what I want to do in the next few minutes is talk about what Tribulus is and the research on it to give you a better idea of whether or not it's right for you. Now, what is Tribulus? Well, it's nothing more than an herbal ingredient that's found in dietary supplements. It comes from a plant, and the plant grows all over the world: China, India, Pakistan, Mexico, Spain, South America. So it's grown all over the place. It's usually referred to as Tribulus terrestis on dietary supplement labels. Sometimes in the research, they do refer to it as puncture vine. I haven't seen that showing up on labels, but puncture vine is something that researchers like to call it occasionally. And the name puncture vine is a reference to the rumors that the thorns of this plant were able to puncture the tires of bicycles. And there's even rumors that in medieval ages, that they would throw the puncture vine down on the ground, and, when invading armies would attack the castle, the horses' hooves would get stuck in the thorns of the plant, and it would impede the invading army. And if you're thinking about something more recent, you're probably should pat yourself on the back, because I look at this as the forerunner of tire spikes, which police may use to capture bad guys who are, driving and don't want to be pulled over by the cops. So there is a little bit of real world similarity here to what you may see if you watch some of these police TV reality shows that are all over the air these days. But besides all that, besides the trivia, Tribulus is it's an ingredient found in a whole lot of dietary supplements. I see it on an ongoing basis. And if you happen to have any of these dietary supplement boosting products in your house right now, just go and look. Odds are you will probably see this as an ingredient. given the popularity of Tribulus terrestris as in the whole dietary supplement world, you would think that this stuff really works, really raises testosterone levels, makes you stronger and all that stuff. But does it? Let's look at the research. So, study came out a few years ago. Involves basically 24 rugby players. These are fit guys, or probably college students. And these rugby players are split into two different groups. One group gets a placebo pill, and the other gets 450 milligrams of Tribulus terrestris. And they carried this study on for 5 weeks. Everybody did the same type of exercise program, and they tested them, before and after. What did they find? Bottom line. Well, 5 weeks after taking the supplement, no change in muscle mass, no change in strength. So it didn't improve muscle mass. It didn't improve muscle strength. There was no decrease in body fat. There was no change in testosterone levels either. And again, that's one of the main reasons why this product is found in dietary supplements, to boost testosterone levels. At least in this study of younger guys, there really wasn't any effect on testosterone levels whatsoever. We've got another investigation. Here, researchers grabbed basically 15 weightlifters. Again, these were younger to middle-aged guys, 20 to 35 years of age. And they basically split them up into, again, a placebo group and a Tribulus group. What I thought was interesting about this is they didn't give everybody basically the same amount like in the previous study. They based the dosage on how much they weighed. So the amount they used in this particular study is 3.21 milligrams per kilogram of their body weight. And again, they're doing this because they're assuming that people of different sizes may require a different dosage. And I think that's a pretty interesting way of looking at things. So what does that mean for, say, us in America who don't do the kilogram thing too much? Well, it's really easy to figure out your weight in kilograms. Just remember the rule of thumb, 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So if you, for instance, weighed 180 pounds, well, that's 82 kilograms. Again, 180 divided by 2.2. So in this particular study, if you weighed, say, 82 kilograms, that comes to about 263 milligrams of Tribulus. Again, I'm just assuming that if you weighed 180, but you may weigh more or less. But the idea is different weights may require different dosages. So in this particular investigation, everybody, again, did the same weightlifting exercise. They did it for 3 days a week. And what did they find? Well, Tribulus, the supplement, didn't cause any change in body weight, didn't cause any change in body fat. They didn't gain weight, they didn't lose weight. They didn't gain fat, they didn't lose fat either. Something else interesting occurred. Both groups, the placebo group and the group that's getting the supplement, improved muscle strength and muscle endurance. In other words, they both improved, but those getting the placebo, not the supplement, the placebo, they actually improved their muscle endurance more than those taking the Tribulus dietary supplement. And when I say they improved their muscle endurance, basically I'm saying that they could do more repetitions on the bench press and the leg press than those who took Tribulus. Unfortunately, this study did not measure testosterone levels, which is a shortcoming of the study. But if you're taking Tribulus to improve muscle strength, well, the research is showing that it may not do as much as you might think. And in terms of, say, testosterone levels, I personally doubt it. Now, I call this a myth, and I call it a myth because I don't see a lot of proof that Tribulus terrestris raises testosterone levels in men. Unfortunately, the problem, however, is that there's not a lot of Tribulus testosterone studies in men, which is odd given its reputation and popularity. So for the guys who are listening to me right now who are concerned with this, I can say that there's only 2 ways that I know of, clinical ways, which will raise testosterone levels in humans. And they are as follows: exercise and weight loss. Those are the only 2 things that I see consistent human evidence for. And there is more evidence for those 2 things, exercise and weight loss, than Tribulus terrestris supplements. And again, to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of testosterone booster supplements. So just coming off the, just being straight with you about that, I don't see a lot of great evidence for hardly any of them. And in terms of Tribulus, I would point out that this is actually something that I did try a little bit ago, many years ago, actually. And I had some odd side effects, which you may or may not experience if you're taking this. Take it for what it is. It's just a one person's report. I noticed that when I took it, my heart started skipping beats. And I don't know what to make of that. And it did continue for some time after I stopped taking the supplement. I don't know what caused it. It obviously, didn't cause any long-term damage, but, I wrote about it. I'm going to put a link to my experiment with Tribulus in the episode notes so you can see what happened and read some of the comments, because other people had written in and said that they also noticed that their heart started skipping beats. I haven't seen anything in the research about it, so I can't say how prevalent it is, but it's just something that, another reason why I would say I'm not a big fan of Tribulus. I personally wouldn't take it, but, if you like it, great. Let me know what you think. But the research so far is saying, yeah, Tribulus is kind of a dud. At least it's a dud in my book. By the way, jump back to episode 23. I did a deep dive into another testosterone boosting supplement, which is it's an extract of an herb called fenugreek. And if Tribulus is popular, fenugreek is even more popular. So definitely look at that if boosting testosterone is something you're interested in. But again, you really can't go wrong with exercise, aerobic exercise, and strength training. They both will increase testosterone levels, and I just don't want you to think it's just strength training. Aerobic exercise will also, and weight loss. And it doesn't usually take a lot of weight loss to see a boosting of testosterone levels. So that's the myth of the week. Okay, let's talk rhabdo. So if you're hearing about this for the very first time, rhabdomyolysis, rhabdo, refers to the breakdown of your muscle cells from too much exercise. Turns out other things can cause it as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the interview. But exercise-induced rhabdomyolysis is what I usually tend to focus on the most. Rhabdo is a very, very serious medical condition, and if you're not familiar with it, don't worry. I'm going to link to my previous podcasts on rhabdo to help you get the lay of the land, as well as my book on rhabdo. I wrote the first book on rhabdo, as well as a bunch of other reviews I've done on this disorder as well. But all that aside, I believe many who develop this condition deal with it on their own. They basically suffer in silence. They usually don't know anyone who's ever gone through this condition before. And that's where our guest today comes in. Alexandra Feszko has not only had rhabdomyolysis herself, she's had it several times. How many? Keep listening. In today's interview, Alexandra shares not only what happened to her when she developed rhabdo, but we also discuss other things, such as, can you return to exercise afterwards? Can you retain and gain back your former fitness level? And what questions should you be asking if you're in the hospital right now with rhabdo? This is a topic that I don't really think anybody talks about. And if you're in the hospital, you have my sympathies and my prayers, and I really do think this is going to help you. But regardless, I do think everybody, whether you've ever had rhabdo or not, is going to find this episode very enlightening. Now, one more thing I do want to point out is that before we do get into talking with Alexandra, I want to say that I believe rhabdo happens far more than most people think. So if you have dealt with rhabdomyolysis in the past, especially exercise-induced rhabdomyolysis, and you want to be interviewed for a future episode so you can share your story and raise awareness, shoot me an email. You can reach me at my contact page on my website, joe-cannon.com. This is a topic that I am extremely passionate about. I really want to raise awareness about rhabdomyolysis. So if you would like to help, shoot me an email. Okay, let's talk to Alexandra. So Alexandria Feszko is a group fitness instructor and personal trainer in Bucks County, PA. She's been in the fitness industry for over 22 years, but beyond that, one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on here today, Alexandria, is that you have a very interesting story to share. You are a very fit woman, and yet you have had rhabdomyolysis multiple times. As such, I think you would be a terrific resource for those who've had rhabdo in the past, as well as those who are suffering from it right now. And I know there are people going through rhabdo right now who are probably listening to us. And so my hope is that we educate them about what rhabdo is and what you have gone through, and also try to give them some semblance of hope for the future, because as we both know, there is hope after rhabdo, there is fitness after rhabdo. And that's another reason that I think you're a great resource, because you have been through the ringer multiple times. So let's cut to the chase. How many times have you had rhabdo?
To the best of my recollection, I believe my first bout with rhabdo was in 2016. And then from there, I've had rhabdo at least 5 times, at least.
So between 5 and 6 times you've had it. Interesting that it started to pop up around 2016, even though you've been in the fitness industry for a long time. Can you trace that first bout to rhabdo to anything particular?
Yes. So I must say first that I have a long-standing history of rare and unique medical issues, from muscle myopathy, metabolic myopathy, things of that nature. I do believe that there's a correlation, but we can go into that a little bit later. But my first bout was an exercise-induced rhabdo occurrence. So around that time, I was actually being trained by a personal trainer, and we were doing supersetting upper body for bicep, tricep, shoulders. And within 48 hours, that is when I knew something was wrong. I did not know what rhabdo really was. I mean, I've heard of it, of course, but I didn't know back then how much I know now, having been through it. Yeah, that was my first occurrence. It was exercise induced, but more so than not, I have had bouts of rhabdo that were absolutely not from exercise at all.
Circle back, when you first got rhabdo and you were working with the personal trainer, did you go back and ask him or her, hey, I got rhabdo, and were they aware of it?
Yes, I did bring it up to him, and he had no idea at all about rhabdo at all, knew nothing about it.
Yeah, a lot of the fitness trainers still don't know about it, which, again, that's probably going to be a tirade for another podcast that I'll do. So you developed symptoms within 48 hours, and the personal trainer wasn't aware of it. Hopefully he is now, I'm sure. So when you developed symptoms, what kind of symptoms were you experiencing, or have you experienced when you had it?
So typically my first symptom is a little bit of swelling throughout whatever area is being affected. And then comes the pain. And this pain is not just an ordinary, muscle pain that you would get after a really good workout, like a delayed DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. It's not like that. It is far beyond that, because typically when you have a really good workout and you make these microscopic tears within the muscle, it heals. And even with movement, you warm up the muscle and the pain can kind of dissipate throughout the day. When you have rhabdo, this pain, even sitting completely still, it feels as though your muscles are being put through a meat grinder and your bones are breaking. That is what it feels like.
Wow. That's intense. Yeah, I've never experienced rhabdo myself, thank goodness, but I have heard not that described like you just did, which was very well. Most people who tell me it's so bad, not even morphine in the hospital helps them.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah. It's just a horrific pain you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. So you had swelling. Were you able to bend or extend your limbs from the swelling, or did that prevent it?
Right. Yep. I could not bend or extend my arms. I had trouble even holding a pen in the hospital to sign, all these waivers. Yeah. it was pretty scary. Very, very swollen, like 3 times the normal size of my arm.
But they never had to do surgery or anything like that to relieve the swelling?
Right. No, thank God, because, another concern is compartment syndrome, which is probably a whole nother podcast. But yeah, that was another concern. But thank God we were getting it in time.
And the symptoms, were your symptoms fairly similar each bout of rhabdo you have? It's the pain and the swelling. Did you have any other issues?
Yeah, pretty much the same each time. And like I said, not more so than not, these episodes were brought on, for me at least, non-workout related. So for example, I had a skin biopsy done, one on each shoulder. And within 2 to 3 days, I had noticed that I was having some pain in my shoulder. And then the wounds where they had taken the little skin biopsy started to really open up. And then before I know it, I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of feeling as though I'm developing some rhabdo. So I went to the hospital, and by that time, they had drawn some blood work, and they said, you are heading right into your stage of rhabdo. Yeah, that was just one of the multiple examples of a rhabdomyolysis brought on by something else other than working out.
You bring up a really good point, even though we're talking mostly about exercise-induced rhabdo, that rhabdo can be caused by multiple things. Exercise is the one that tends to get a lot of attention these days, which we're all happy about, that it is finally getting picked up by the mainstream media. But you can get rhabdo from electrocution, car crash, falling off a ladder, trauma. So even some medications, legal and non-legal drugs can cause it. So, it sounds like with yours, at least with the biopsy, it was more of a trauma-induced rhabdo. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a message I think people need to hear about. It's not just exercise can cause this. But you did say that when you went to the hospital, they did some tests, and they basically diagnosed you on the fly, and so it was happening. When you have gone to the hospital, were they aware of what's happening? I mean, did you ever get any pushback from, say, the doctors and nurses? And if you walk in, you say, "Hey, I think I'm having rhabdo." Did they give you any, funny looks and say, "Nah, you're not getting rhabdo"? And I bring it up because I've heard stories from people who tell me sometimes doctors or nurses don't believe people when they come in and they say they have rhabdo. Have you experienced any of that, or were the doctors and nurses really up to speed with what's happening and helped you the best?
The doctors, would go in and tell them, that we need to do some blood work. This is what I think is going on. They were pretty much right on it each time. I think the larger problem would be the doctors or nurses not having, I guess, as much knowledge as others do about rhabdo and the severity of it and how much pain it causes. And my very first bout with rhabdo, I had a seizure, and I could have died from it. So luckily that didn't happen in subsequent, episodes. But that is the seriousness of this.
Wow. So your very first bout with rhabdo, when you met with that personal trainer, you developed a seizure from that incident. Oh my goodness. I didn't realize that. Did you get a seizure in the hospital or before you went to the hospital?
I was at home, and my husband was home, and he had called one of my top doctors that is at Temple University, and she kind of deals with my muscle myopathies and metabolic myopathies and that sort of thing. And he had her cell phone number. He called her. She said, "If you don't get your wife to the hospital right now, she has rhabdo. I can guarantee it. She is going to die in the next few hours." So that's exactly what he did. Rushed me to the hospital, immediately did blood work, and my CK levels were flying above 100,000. I remember being able to semi-walk, but the doctor said I shouldn't have been able to walk at all, having levels that high.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow, that is incredible. Thank God your doctors, nurses, they gave your husband the right advice, and you got to the hospital when you needed to be. Wow, yeah, that's incredible. And that was the only time you've ever had a seizure from rhabdo?
Right.
When you are discharged from the hospital, I assume that every time you've had rhabdo, you wind up in the hospital?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Because I try to manage it as much as I can at home. I have 5 kids, so obviously very busy mom and working and all of that. So I do know that my health really, truly should come first, because if I can't take care of myself, of course, I can't take care of anybody else. It's just very important that I stay hydrated. But when it gets to the point where your levels are so high, you really do have to go to the hospital so that they can hydrate you. I remember staying up to 7 days at one point.
When you are discharged from the hospital, what advice do the doctors and nurses give you to take care of yourself when you go home? I mean, I'm sure they just don't say, okay, you're being discharged. I mean, do they give you any kind of post-hospital advice on what to do for rhabdo?
They'll print out a sheet that says rhabdomyolysis on it, and kind of some care tips and strategies, that sort of thing. I remember they had hooked me up with a walker at one point for one of the episodes, and had a nurse come to my home every single day to check on me and help me. But as far as the doctors and nurses and aftercare, I think having it so many times, they know I know what to do. And that if anything were to happen, of course, I would go back to the hospital just in case.
And you said your creatine kinase level, your CK levels were over 100,000.
Yes.
Is that about par for the course every time you get rhabdo? Do they go up or higher or lower than that, or do they stay around that same level?
So every time they've been different.
Right.
I remember one time it was around 10,000. Another time was 25,000. One time it was 18 to 20,000. 50,000. So it's been different each time. I know that a normal baseline for a female is between, correct me if I'm wrong, but up to 175, right?
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth, because if people are listening to us right now, they may have not heard of this before. Creatine kinase is an enzyme that is commonly measured when people have rhabdo. And normally if it's 5 times higher than normal, that's a cutoff point when doctors will say, well, okay, you probably have rhabdo. But that's not really a clear-cut definition. Everybody agrees with that 5 times normal, but you're right. You're experiencing levels 10,000, 100,000. Normal levels are in the hundreds. And that can vary, according to how much exercise you do and all that stuff, but it's not normal for people to have 5,000 level of creatine kinase on a normal level. But yeah, around 100, 200 or whatever, it's perfectly as normal for most people, but you're experiencing crazy high amounts. And I'm glad we were talking about this, because for the personal trainers who are listening to us right now and hearing about this for the first time, it's always good for them to remember, if they ever meet somebody who has had rhabdo, the very first thing they're going to tell fitness trainers are what their creatine kinase levels are. And I say that from experience, because I get a lot of people who say that to me. They come to me and the first words out of their mouth are, my creatine kinase levels was 85,000, 100,000, 150,000. It's almost, it's like that's the only thing people hear about in the hospital. And so that's the first words out of their mouth when they talk to me or something like that. But it is something that I think everybody, at least in the fitness world, should be aware of. But yeah, your levels were extremely high, although not the highest I've heard. I've heard of even higher than 100,000. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, did they ever measure your liver enzymes?
Yes, they have been off here and there with liver enzymes and kidney function. I mean, but besides the pain of rhabdo and the swelling of rhabdo, when you go into the hospital and they are pumping you with bags upon bags upon bags of fluid, it really does wreak havoc on your kidney function and your liver function and your electrolytes. Just regular bodily functions just go absolutely haywire.
Yeah, and the liver enzymes are something I think a lot of people don't think of, because if they've heard of rhabdo, they think kidneys, and they think it's a kidney-centric disorder. And I always like to point out there's other things involved with rhabdo, just the kidneys, and the liver enzymes get out of whack. When you were in the hospital to come back to the swelling, did they elevate your arms or legs? Did they pack you in ice at all?
I remember asking for ice because that would help. They would need to put these compression sleeves, compression socks on my legs, as well as these, they're kind of like leg massagers, and they blow them up and they contract so that you don't develop any blood clots in your limbs. So they do that typically, I heard, for any patients that have rhabdo that are in the hospital. And then for my arms, it was impossible for a doctor to take a blood pressure. It had to be done around my ankle if I had rhabdo in the upper body. Putting an IV in was absolute and utter torture. Yeah.
So I'm glad you shared that, because I again, when I surf around on Instagram and Twitter, I see people unfortunately just making fun of rhabdo, taking it lightly, using hashtag rhabdo in their Twitter posts and in their Instagram posts. And I keep thinking to myself, if you only knew how bad and how serious this condition it was, you would not be making fun of it. And so I'm really glad that you talked about what you went through in the hospital, because I really don't think anybody can really just understand how bad this is until they actually go through it themselves. So liver enzymes up, creatine kinase levels go up. It's a lot of pain and suffering. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, you're a personal trainer, been a personal trainer for a long time, and you come down with rhabdo. Number one, did you get any kind of pushback from the fitness community over, well, you got rhabdo? And because I've heard from time to time people telling me, and which again is just unfathomable to think about, people have told me that they've actually been made fun of by other people in the gym. Have you experienced anything like that?
I have not at all. It's been very, very supportive. And I believe it's because, people see me out there and doing my thing in personal training, and I am physically fit, and I eat very healthy. I make sure I'm always hydrated. So I've never got any pushback or negative comments or anything like that. And I think on top of that, I've never had a client develop rhabdo. I have had clients come to me because they know I have a large amount of education on rhabdo, and they have had experiences in the past with other trainers that did not know what rhabdo was, and they drilled them into the ground with, basically kind of that scare tactic that some personal trainers use to make you feel like you're really out of shape, and they're going to give you the hardest workout that you've ever had in your whole life. And it brings on a lot of pain and swelling, whether they developed rhabdo or they developed maybe a very mild case of it, but they were able to bounce back from that. I have never had a client in my care ever develop rhabdo. Yeah. And I think it's because of my level of education, but also I talk a lot about there is some sort of association with, whether it be genetic related or autoimmune related predispositions that may set certain people up, like myself, to develop rhabdo a little bit easier than someone else. I remember one time I was out in the cold for hours and hours at an event. My son was DJing, and it was too many hours, and I was bundled up, but the cold triggered the rhabdo.
One of the things that is so fascinating about this is you've had it many times. It started around 2016, not before 2016. Right. Have you ever figured out why you may be more prone to getting this than anybody else? Again, prior to 2016, it appears you haven't had it, but something changed, if you will, in 2016. Has anybody ever, like for instance, you mentioned genetic issues. Have you ever gotten genetic tested or any issues?
Yes. More recently, in the last few years, I've had a lot more testing. I've seen a lot more doctors that specialize in specific things. And I had a genetic test for something called MTHFR. Mm-hmm. That is a specific gene mutation that makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for your body to convert folate into methylfolate. so that my body is unable to do that. So my histamine levels rise and I get enormous amount of inflammation pretty much 100% of the time within my body. So that could be a contributing factor, doctors have said, along with muscle myopathy and metabolic myopathy that we are still doing more testing for to kind of pinpoint that a little bit more, as well as possibly a few other factors. But I do believe, autoimmune related, genetic related, and those predispositions can really play a factor.
Definitely some genetic things going on. It's so interesting. It didn't pop up before 2016. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, and the other thing, very important to mention, I had a muscle biopsy in 2013 on my right quadricep. That doctor accidentally nicked my femoral nerve in my right quadricep. That instantaneously triggered CRPS/RSD. That's chronic regional pain syndrome. And from that point on, because of that trauma, things in my body started to change. I started to develop more autoimmune issues. I started to develop HS, which is something I was telling you about just a few days ago. So around that time, with that trauma to my right quadricep in 2013, that was kind of when things started to change a little bit. I know that sometimes our body experiences different types of trauma, and things can happen maybe right away or maybe down the road. Your brain or body, may develop these other anomalies and things that happen mentally or physically or what have you.
I wanted to circle back about the different times you've had rhabdo. How long does it take you to recuperate and get back to normal?
From the time I get out of the hospital, which was like 3 to 5 days of staying in the hospital, I think up to 7 days really, it takes a solid 3 to 6 weeks. Because I am not able to just go right back to weight training or resistance training or even, extreme cardiovascular, activities, anything like that. I really, really listen to my body and I allow my muscles time to heal, because it truly is a significant death of the muscle itself in the area that was traumatized, and it takes time to recuperate from that.
So you don't recommend that people try to go back to the gym a week after getting out of the hospital?
Yep, absolutely not. You need time to hydrate. You have to, if your nutrition is even a little bit off, you really have to be conscious of making sure that you are eating enough protein and the right type of carbohydrates, and decreasing any sort of sugar intake, making sure that your primary care physician sees you for that follow-up visit maybe 3 days later, does blood work for, kind of to check where your levels are at, as well as your kidney function, maybe a basic or a little bit more of a complex metabolic panel or something like that, just to kind of see where your vitamins are at and the minerals in your body, so that you can kind of, pinpoint where you're with your doctor, how far you've come since you left the hospital. And then, when you're feeling like you have more energy, because it is draining mentally and physically, very exhausting for a few weeks, because it's not just when you're in the hospital, they're giving you fluid. They are also giving you pain medication, IV pain medication. And that just takes a toll on your body. It's very fatiguing. Then on top of that, they have to reduce your blood pressure, because if they don't reduce your blood pressure when they are pumping your body full of fluids very rapidly, you could have a heart attack. So they're giving you blood pressure meds on top of that. So your body has to kind of detox this stuff out over a few weeks, through rest and hydration and very good nutrition.
I wanted to touch on that because I'm glad you said it, because, I have met people who say, I can't wait to get back in the gym. I'll be back in the gym in a week. And, it's like, I really wouldn't do it. And so I wanted people to hear it coming from somebody other than me, because sometimes I think people, look at me funny, like, oh, there he goes again talking about rhabdo. And I don't think it gets taken as seriously as it should. So you're in the fitness business, and when you get rhabdo, let me ask you this question. When you can't work out, does that affect your psyche at all as you're recuperating? And I bring this up because I do really believe that there is a rhabdosis trauma, and I believe there's a post-traumatic stress syndrome going on with this that nobody's talking about. But everybody tells me the same thing over and over again, and it's the worst pain I've ever had, and I've never heard of this before. And a lot of them tell me that they're depressed because they cannot exercise anymore. Did you go through any of that?
What I would say to that would be, when you abruptly stop a workout that your body is used to, or, even if you're doing weight training, a specific number of days out of the week, or, cardiovascular workouts, and your body is used to this routine of, working out. When you abruptly stop that, it does impact your hormonal levels. So there is going to be a fluctuation there. And yes, you can develop some mild to moderate, in some small cases, severe depression, but you will be able to bounce back. You will feel better, but you have to take care of yourself and do exactly what the doctors are telling you to do, and listen to your body. I know that, for the people listening, you may have this right now and really be struggling in the hospital or at home, and you just need to take the time and just recover, because you're going to be able to bounce back that much quicker once you are in the gym and you do have that energy and that drive back and that motivation. The depression, the anxiety, the mood swings, all of that will start to subside, because remember, you may have narcotics in your body and all these other medications. It is going to take some time.
You bring up a really good point about detoxing all those medications and how they may even play a role in the moods that people are experiencing, maybe even altering maybe the microbiome, which we know can play a role in some aspects of our mental outlook on things. So there's a lot going on other than, more than rhabdo once you get discharged, so people need to consider all that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Today, you teach boxing classes. You're very physically active, so you're definitely proof that someone who's had rhabdo, even many, many times, can return to their former fitness level. And I think you're definitely a motivation for, I think, everybody listening to this right now, because I know a lot of people listening who are probably feeling crushed and defeated that they cannot return to exercise again. Many of them tell me they're even terrified of exercising again because they never want to go back into rhabdo. And I try to tell them that, while, the statistics sometimes say that if you've had rhabdo once, you're more likely to get it again, it's also true that once you've experienced it, you don't want to experience it again. So you're maybe going to pay more attention to your body, and that can lower your risk of getting it a second time or a third time. So, for that person who's listening to us right now and they have rhabdo, or maybe they've had it, a few months ago, and they want to go back into the gym and they want to start trying to regain some of their former fitness. Do you have any advice on how they might go back into to working out again if they're afraid to?
Absolutely. I remember the first time I developed rhabdo, I was terrified. I was terrified to go back to teaching. But I did let my participants know what I was kind of dealing with and that I would do modifications. And I still taught the most awesome classes. But for myself, I started out walking. I started out with some light resistance band work, literally 2-pound weights, then 3-pound weights, and slowly building up over a few weeks. And then I could get up to my, for upper body, 15 to 20-pound weights, and lower body was back to 100 pounds or whatever exercise I was doing, but taking it slow. So going for walks is very, very beneficial cardiovascular wise. And then for your strength component, maybe doing some core work, some work in prone. So doing some planks, working a little bit in supination, being on your back and doing some abdominal moves. Things like that, strengthening your core and then working to your legs next. If you have rhabdo in your upper body, working on those other muscle groups first, and then kind of, bringing it up to the upper body. Or if you have it in your quadriceps, working your core and upper body a little bit more, and then focusing more on that lower body in a few weeks. But there are absolutely exercises and things that you can do in the meantime. Maybe I would say approximately 10 to 14 days after getting out of the hospital, possibly 7 days, you can really start to walk and, that sort of thing, maybe indoors. Since it is winter, you can be walking on the treadmill indoors or around the gym, at your gym, something like that, just keeping it lighter.
I think that's great advice. Again, so many people are just, the word that comes up so many times over the years is terrified. And you said it yourself. I mean, they're terrified to work out again. They're thinking they're going to get it. And again, a lot of them are also thinking about the medical bills that they may incur depending on what their insurance might be. So that's another scary thing that's in the back of their minds as well, which may again contribute to the post-traumatic stress that I think some people go through. Switching gears, do you have any advice for somebody who's listening to us right now who is maybe in the hospital with rhabdo and what they might be going through and right now and what they have to look forward to when they get out of the hospital? Do you have any advice for these people or some words of comfort for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having been in your shoes, if you're listening and you're in the hospital right now, you are going to be your best advocate. The nurses are going to advocate for you. Make sure that you ask as many questions as you feel comfortable asking, because this is your body, and you're going to be scared. You're going to be worried about, is this muscle damage completely permanent? What am I going to do? Ask questions. There are physical therapists there. There are social workers there. You have so many different specialists and doctors that you can tap into while you're in the hospital. I know every time I had a social worker in the room kind of being my advocate and hooking me up with whatever it was that I may have needed in order to go home and recover a little bit easier, upon your day of leaving, making sure that all of your questions have been answered. Maybe in listening to this podcast, a few things have been brought to mind. Write them down, re-listen to this, and just have hope and know that this is going to get better. Your body is meant to heal. Your mind is meant to heal. So this is not permanent. This also does not necessarily mean that since you got rhabdo this time that you're going to definitely get it again if you do this again. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because everybody is completely different. But now you have so much more knowledge, having been through this, that you're going to be able to take some preventative measures, and you're going to know what your thresholds are and know that when you're at the gym, what you can and can't really do.
I think that's really good advice. You brought up being an advocate and asking questions. Let me ask you this question. When you did go home, did you have to modify your home environment at all, such as walking up steps, walking down steps? Was there any modifications at home you had to go through during the healing process?
Yes, there was. Like I had mentioned before, there was one time where I had a walker. Mm-hmm. So I went home with the walker, and I had to walk very slow. And I had an in-home nurse. I remember one time that came for a solid 2 weeks. It was basically in-home hospice care. And then obviously I got to say goodbye to those nurses, and then I was on my own, and I was well. But it was very important for me to stay in bed as much as possible, continue to stay hydrated as much as possible. You will gain weight in the hospital, not just because you're sedentary, but because they're pumping you full of so much fluid. I was almost unrecognizable. And Joe, I'm happy to share those pictures with you as well. So that fluid retention that you are experiencing right now will go down, but you have to give it approximately 2 to 4 weeks, literally, for that fluid retention to go down. So you're going to be uncomfortable. You may not fit in your clothing. So making sure that you're wearing clothing that is easier to take off and put on. Maybe it's a zip-up hoodie or something like that. That just makes life 10 times easier. Making sure that you have somebody there that is able to kind of help you having flip-flops or just easy shoes just to slip on, because if you have rhabdo in your biceps, triceps, or shoulders, it's a little bit hard to get those shoes on and off. Also making sure that in the bathroom, if you have a walker, or maybe you apply something so it makes it a little less challenging to stand up when you're in the shower. If you need to sit down, you're going to have to put a chair in the shower to keep yourself from falling, keep yourself safe, because you may feel lightheaded after getting out of the hospital and having been through everything that your body and brain is going through.
I am so glad you brought that up. The home modifications, again, another issue that people don't really think about too much. And I'm really glad you gave those insights that I think a lot of people with rhabdo may not be thinking about at this point. So again, if they are in the hospital right now with rhabdo, definitely speak to a social worker and doctors and see what they need to do when they do get discharged and go back home. So I really appreciate you bringing up this really good information. As you know, I've been talking about this topic for a long time, but I've never had it. So you have such unique insights. So when I wanted to do a podcast, I knew you were definitely on the short list of people I wanted to talk to about this, because your insights are much different than mine. Just, I read a lot of the studies and stuff, but you've experienced it. And so for the person who's going through it or has gone through it, your experiences, I think they're so much more weightier than any words that I could say. So I really appreciate you granting me this interview and coming on today. Alexandra, where can people reach you and find out more about you and, contact you if they have any questions about this condition or just want to, reach out and say, hey?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. So Facebook, you can find me at Alexis Victoria Feszko. You can also find me, and I'm sure that we can put some links up as well for my Instagram handle. It is at fitness_mom of 5, I believe.
I will be linking to it, yes.
Yeah. And then I am also at Witherspoon Boxing and Fitness. We are located in Bristol, PA at the Clock Tower. That is where I teach numerous classes such as Plyoga, which is a combination of plyometrics and yoga, cardio kickboxing, boot camp classes, as well as personal train, sports nutrition, stretch therapy, all of those things to kind of help our mind and body, as well as teaching cycle at the YMCA in Fairless Hills location. And I do in-home personal training as well.
Fantastic. And I'm going to link to all that, and definitely your Facebook and Instagram pages are really good. And for the person who's listening to us right now, your page is really good because you're proof that you can return to exercise and even exercise intensely. And so because of that, your pages, I think, are going to be a real comfort to those people who may be, sitting, listening to us right now and thinking that, they can never return to exercise again. You're absolutely proof that they can. So I really want to thank you for doing this interview with me. And I know you have made a difference in the lives of a whole lot of people listening to us right now who may have felt hopeless at the start of this episode. So I really want to thank you for this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really want to thank Alexandra for dropping all of those knowledge bombs on us, especially the information about what to do if you're in the hospital, what questions you should ask, as well as what she personally has gone through. Because as much as the science of rhabdo is of interest to people, I really do think it helps to hear this from people who have gone through this themselves. And so I can't thank Alexandra enough for taking the time to grant me an interview to speak about her story. I think this may have been the very first time she's ever done a public interview where she's talked about what happened to her. So let me know what you think. Drop me an email at my website, joe-cannon.com or supplementclarity.com, and let me know. Again, if you've had rhabdo and you want to be on a future episode, definitely shoot me another email and let me know, and we can talk about it. So we're going a little long this time. We're pushing up about 1 hour, so I'm going to end this episode with a quote of the week, and it goes like this: "You are never too old to set another goal or dream another dream." C.S. Lewis. Until next week, same bad time, same bad channel, I am Joe Cannon. Go out, be safe, and where you can, try to make a difference.